I had never felt rain like this before, so thick it seemed to press down on me, soaking through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. The downpour hammered against the roof of my car, and the windshield wipers were working overtime, struggling to keep up with the torrent. The road was a blur of darkness and water, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning that illuminated the deserted countryside. I was heading home after visiting a friend in a neighboring town, taking a shortcut through an unfamiliar winding road. The GPS had lost its signal over an hour ago, and I was left to navigate the snaking path on my own. I wasn't worried at first. I've always been good with directions. But the rain. The rain was making everything feel strange and disorienting. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. I felt a creeping anxiety settling in the pit of my stomach, growing heavier with every minute that passed. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, hidden in the thick curtain of rain. Suddenly, I spotted a figure on the side of the road. My heart jumped. A person? Out here? At this hour? I slowed the car down, squinting through the windshield. It was a woman, standing motionless in the rain, her hair plastered to her face, clothes soaked through. She was staring straight ahead, not even glancing at me as I approached. I rolled down the window slightly, rain splashing onto my face. "Hey, are you all right?" I called out. She didn't respond, just kept staring ahead. I hesitated. My instincts told me to keep driving, but the humane part of me couldn't leave her out there in the middle of nowhere in this storm. I pulled over and opened the door. "Do you need a ride?" I asked again, louder this time. She finally turned her head to look at me, her eyes dark and hollow. She nodded slowly, her face devoid of any emotion. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I ignored it. "Hop in," I said, trying to sound cheerful. She moved toward the car with a slow, almost deliberate pace, like she was reluctant. She climbed into the passenger seat without a word, and the smell hit me immediately, a musty, earthy scent, like wet leaves and dirt. I tried to ignore it and got back into the driver's seat. I glanced at her again. She was staring straight ahead, her hands resting in her lap. She hadn't even buckled her seatbelt. Where are you headed?" I asked, trying to break the eerie silence. No response. She didn't even blink. I cleared my throat and tried again. "It's a nasty storm. You were lucky I came by." Nothing. Just that blank stare. My unease grew. I wanted to ask more questions, but something about her presence made me feel uncomfortable. I decided it was best to focus on the road. I kept driving, and the rain kept pouring, the sound of it like a constant whisper against the windows. Minutes passed in silence, and I found myself glancing at her out of the corner of my eye. Her clothes seemed older than I'd first noticed, out of fashion, like something from a different era. And then I realized, her clothes weren't just wet, they were muddy, torn in places. My stomach tightened. "What happened to you?" I finally asked, unable to keep quiet any longer. "Were you in an accident?" She slowly turned her head to face me, and I saw her lips twitch, as if she were about to say something. But then nothing. Just that empty stare. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Suddenly, the car jolted. I'd hit something. I cursed under my breath and pulled over, my heart racing. "Stay here," I muttered to her, though I wasn't sure why I was even saying it. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the rain. The water was freezing against my skin, and I felt it soak through my clothes instantly. I shone the light around, searching for whatever I'd hit. There was nothing in front of the car. I walked around to the back, and then I saw it, a deer, lying on its side in the middle of the road. It was dead, its neck bent at an unnatural angle. I shuddered and turned back to the car. That's when I saw it. The passenger seat was empty. The woman was gone. Panic surged through me. I ran to the car and opened the door, looking around frantically. "Hello?" I shouted into the storm, my voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain. "Where are you?" I heard a rustling behind me, and I spun around, the flashlight beam dancing wildly. There she was, standing just a few feet away, staring at me with those same hollow eyes. Her mouth opened slightly, and a sound escaped, soft, barely audible over the rain, like a low moan. I felt a cold dread settle in my chest. What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. She stepped closer, her movements slow, almost jerky, like she was struggling against something unseen. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my ears. Then she spoke, her voice low and raspy, like she hadn't used it in years. "Why did you leave me?" I froze. I don't understand," I stammered. "I didn't leave you." Her face twisted, her eyes wide with something between fear and anger. "Why did you leave me in the dark?" she whispered, her voice barely louder than the rain. I didn't know what to say, my mind racing. "I didn't leave you anywhere," I insisted. I just stopped to help you." She shook her head slowly, water dripping from her hair. "You left me," she repeated, her voice growing louder, more insistent. "You left me in the dark, and now you'll never leave." And then she lunged at me. I scrambled back, tripping over my own feet, falling hard onto the wet pavement. The flashlight flew from my hand, spinning away. I could barely see her, just a shadow moving toward me in the darkness. I tried to get up, but my legs felt weak, like they were made of lead. The rain grew heavier, the sound of it deafening. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with fear. She was closer now, her face inches from mine, those dark, empty eyes boring into me. I felt her cold hand touch my cheek, and everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying in my car, the rain still pounding on the roof. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. I blinked, disoriented, my heart racing. I looked around, but there was no sign of the woman. I quickly started the car and drove away, my hands trembling on the wheel. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I don't know what I saw that night. I don't know if she was real, or just a figment of my imagination, a ghost conjured by the rain and the dark. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when the rain starts to fall, I hear her voice. The rain had started hours ago, a steady drumming on the roof that filled the house with its constant rhythm. I was alone tonight, the first time in months. My roommate had left for the weekend, leaving me with the old, creaky house and my thoughts. I'd convinced myself I was fine with it. I'd lived here long enough to be comfortable, even on a night like this. I settled on the couch with a blanket and a book, the kind of old detective novel that usually kept my mind busy. But tonight, every creak of the house seemed louder, every shadow seemed to stretch just a little longer. The rain was different too, harder, more insistent, like it was trying to break through the windows. I kept glancing at my phone, hoping for a distraction, a message, anything to pull me out of this uneasy feeling. But there was nothing. Just the rain, the book, and the old clock on the wall ticking away the minutes. Midnight was approaching, and I was starting to regret choosing tonight to stay up late. Then I heard it, a soft knock at the door. I froze. It was so faint, I thought maybe I'd imagined it, just a sound mixed in with the rain. But then it came again, a little louder this time. Knock, knock, knock. I glanced at the clock, 12:03 a.m. Who would be at my door at this hour? My heart picked up pace as I got up from the couch and walked to the front door, careful to avoid the squeaky floorboards. I peered through the peephole, but all I could see was darkness. The porch light had gone out earlier in the storm, and the rain made it hard to make out anything beyond the glass. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice louder than I'd intended. No answer. Just the rain, pounding harder against the door now. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe it was just a trick of the storm, a tree branch knocking against the house. I hesitated, then turned away, heading back to the couch, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Then came the knock again, this time louder, more insistent. Knock, knock, knock. I jumped, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a branch. Someone was out there. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry, and walked back to the door. I leaned in close to the peephole again, trying to see through the rain. This time, I saw something, a figure, just barely visible in the darkness. They were standing too far back to make out any features. "Who is it?" I called again, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. No answer. The figure just stood there, unmoving. I felt my pulse quicken. "If you don't say something, I'm not opening the door." I shouted. Still nothing. The figure remained, a dark shape against the rain. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Maybe it was someone in trouble, stranded in the storm. But why wouldn't they answer? Why just stand there? The knocking started again, harder this time, almost frantic. Knock, knock, knock. I felt a surge of panic. My phone was on the couch. I needed to call someone, anyone. I turned, ready to grab it, when I heard a voice. A soft, whispering voice, barely audible over the rain. Let me in. I frotse, my bloed running cold. What did you say? Let me in, the voice repeated, still a whisper, but louder this time. It was a woman's voice, soft and pleading. Who are you? I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. What do you want? Please, just let me in, she whispered again, her voice almost drowned out by the rain. My hand was shaking as I reached for the phone, dialing 911. The line rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. I hung up and tried again, my eyes darting back to the door. The figure hadn't moved, but I could feel its presence, the way it seemed to press against the house, as if trying to force its way inside. The voice came again, softer now, almost a sob. I'm cold, please, let me in. Something about the voice sent a shiver down my spine. It sounded wrong somehow, like it wasn't coming from a real person, but from somewhere deep and hollow. I felt an overwhelming urge to open the door, to let her in, to stop the knocking, the pleading. My hand was on the doorknob before I realized it. I jerked back, shaking my head. No. I wasn't going to open that door. I'm calling the police. I shouted. They'll be here any minute. The knocking stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening, except for the rain. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest. I could still see the figure through the peephole, standing perfectly still. Then, the whispering started again. Let me in. I know you're alone. My breath caught in my throat. How did she know I was alone? I backed away from the door, nearly tripping over the coffee table. My phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. The voice grew louder, more insistent, like it was right against my ear. Let me in. Let me in. I grabbed my phone and ran to the kitchen, trying to put as much distance as possible between me and that voice. I felt the walls closing in, the air growing colder. The whispers followed me, echoing through the house. Let me in. Let me in. I reached the kitchen and grabbed a knife from the drawer, clutching it tightly in my hand. The house felt darker now, the shadows stretching long and thin. The rain outside grew heavier, almost like it was trying to drown out the whispers. Then, all at once, everything stopped. The whispers, the knocking, the rain, it all went silent. I stood there, knife in hand, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The only sound was the ticking of the clock, the seconds dragging by. I waited, listening, my ears straining for any sound, any sign that she was still there. But there was nothing. Just the quiet, empty house. I slowly walked back to the front door, knife still in hand. I looked through the peephole. The figure was gone. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Maybe she'd left. Maybe it was over. I turned the deadbolt, double-checking it, just to be safe. I turned around, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. And then I heard it. A soft, scratching sound, coming from the back door. I turned slowly, my heart sinking, the knife trembling in my hand. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I could hear the whispering again, louder now, more desperate. Let me in, please, let me in. I backed away, my eyes wide, the knife clutched tightly. I could feel the cold seeping into the house, the shadows growing darker. And then I saw it, handprints wet and muddy, appearing one by one on the kitchen window, moving slowly, deliberately, like someone was dragging their fingers across the glass. I stumbled back, my heart pounding, and the whispering grew louder, filling the house, echoing off the walls. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in. I ran to my room, slamming the door shut, locking it, my breath coming in panicked gasps. I could still hear the whispering, seeping through the walls, the floor, the very air around me. I don't know how long I stayed there, sitting in the dark, the knife gripped tightly in my hand. The whispering didn't stop. I'm still here, waiting. The rain hasn't stopped either. And I know she's still out there, somewhere whispering, waiting for me to let her in.